Okay, for activity 6, you're going to get a little bit of practice on reporting statistics and how you report them. And this is going to become really relevant when we start talking about IAs and how you would do this in within that an IA report or a lab report. Okay, so using the data you collected um, on Elodia and onion cells in lessons 5 and 6, you're going to use that data. So that was the average area of each of those two different types of cells, and you're going to find the appropriate stats test for them. And within that, these are the steps you need to be able to do on an IA and what you need to be able to do for this assignment. So first, state your question and determine the null and alternative hypothesis. Okay, so you're looking. What are you looking for? Is there a statistically significant difference between LOD and onion cells? Right. And then what would your null hypothesis be? Which is no difference. Your versus your alternative. There is a difference. Obviously, said a little bit differently. And then for number 2, you determine the mean and the standard deviation. Okay. And then determine which stat test you will use and justify why. Right. And that's going right back to this table. Just follow it right through to figure that out. Um, and then you'll punch your data into your stats test or into your stats spreadsheet here, and you'll come up with um, um, a sorry, you will come up with whether it's significant or not, and then you need to explain how you know there's statistically significance, and then what does that actually mean to your findings, right? So put it kind of into words that demonstrate you understand what that means. Okay. And kind of sometimes, depending on how big the sample size is, that might actually increase the chance of false positives. Don't worry too much about that. So here's an example. So there was a study done looking at was there a difference in HL bio scores between a group that studied 2 hours a night and a group that did not. Okay. So the alternative is basically there's no significant statistical difference, right? Studying 2 hours versus none doesn't make a difference, right? And that's, as IB student, that's what you're all hoping for, right? Um, and then the alternative is there is a statistically significant difference. Okay, so one of those two will have a difference in scores. Okay, so this is kind of how you might start it out. Um, and then you have table 1 here. Again, title, and here's the table. Obviously, these should be a bit closer, but that's a limitation to sites. And I used a t-test. The stat value, the t-value that I got was 3.43, and the critical value was 2.3. So because my t-value here, my stat value, is higher than the critical value, it is significant. So there is a statistically significant difference between these scores. It doesn't tell us which one's better. Maybe actually not studying is better, but that's where you would look at your standard deviation, your mean, to figure that part out. Okay. Um, and then here was an explanation, right? So a t-test was used to study. I'm justifying that. Then I explained how I know that. This means there's a difference between those two groups, suggesting that 2 hours will increase the score in HL biology. I could have added here about this is because the average test score was higher for the group that studied 2 hours, right? And then I put some other stuff. This was done with a small sample size of 10 students. So it's hard to generalize the study to a larger population, right? That's more of an evaluation point that you might um, mention there also. So this is kind of gives you an example, not the greatest example, but an example of how you might set this up. Okay. And then I would expect you to put activity 6 on Google Classroom. All right. All right. Thank you.